In this tabletop review, I'm going to be taking a look at a fairly new product made by Bravo Company. This is their own trigger assembly. This is their PNT trigger assembly. So it is a combination of nickel and Teflon plating, and it is a tuned trigger. So I'll read some of the specifications on this trigger. After I do a little bit of reading here and get some of the specifications out of the way, we're going to go ahead and take it out of the package. We're going to take a look at it. I'm also going to install it into a lower and kind of test the functionality in a lower. And I'm also going to compare this with its closest rival, which would be the Alg Act Trigger. And we'll talk about some of the differences between this BCM PNT trigger and the Alg Defense Act trigger as well. I will also put an Alg Act trigger in the same lower and test its functionality and give you some of my thoughts on what I think of the two. Now, the BCM PNT trigger is going to be a full mil-spec trigger. So nothing in this trigger kit is going to be substandard. And that's typical for Bravo Company. They build some of the best products on the market, hands down. The trigger and the hammer in this kit are precision machined mil-spec AIS I8620 USGI TDP mil-spec steel. Let's see. The trigger and the hammer go through a 3-step heat treating process and case hardening process, and this yields a stronger and more wear-resistant product. BCM, or one of their subsidiaries, polishes the engagement surfaces for a grit-free function of their trigger assembly. According to BCM, that process increases smoothness and reduces friction up to 300% beyond mil-spec. Now, what's a little bit less clear as we jump into the plating process here for the BCM PNT trigger, they make references to nickel and Teflon. Now, they don't use the phrase nickel boron or nickel Teflon. They discuss their product using nickel and Teflon in 2 separate paragraphs. And that's a little bit different from how ALG describes their product. So, according to BCM, the electroless nickel finish is applied for a smoother trigger pull with less grit and reduced felt creep. Nickel also provides a long-lasting finish that will not rust, corrode, and discolor, and so on. Moving on to Teflon. What is Teflon plated in this kit is the trigger and the hammer. The trigger and the hammer pins are not mentioned on whether or not they are Teflon coated. Same with the disconnector. The disconnector is a 1070 stamped steel material that's fine blanked for cleaner edges. It's double disc ground to precise size, and all of the hammer engagement surfaces are also ground for a super clean reset. They don't specifically say that the disconnector is Teflon plated. So I'm a little left out in the dark for exactly what they're doing. And the fact that there is no nickel boron mentioned here is a little concerning to me as well. So I basically read off some of the specs on this particular trigger. Let me go ahead. Let's get this out of the package and take a look at the individual components and see what we're working with. Okay, with our fire control group out of the packaging, these do come pre-assembled as you see them with the springs and the pins installed. And of course there is a disconnector spring installed. You can see that I can tell that it's there. Now, just by holding this and in my hands and feeling it, the trigger and the hammer feel like a nickel Teflon finish. Nickel Teflon is very, very slick to your naked skin. It almost feels like it has oil on it when you feel it, and that's been my perception with anything that has a nickel Teflon type finish on it. What I can also tell by feeling this disconnector is not nickel plated, and it does not have a Teflon finish on it. This is like a standard phosphate finish. It's not the same finish, so that I can verify. The same with the pins. The pins are black also. Those are not a nickel finish or a Teflon finish on the pins. Now the springs, from what I understand, are a standard mil-spec type of spring, which is going to give you roughly right around 6 pounds on your pull weight. What I've, aside from those initial observations, there are some stamping marks on the trigger and on the hammer. I don't know exactly what those mean. They could be forging marks or manufacturer marks. That's an S and a star, and this one has a star on it. And on the reverse side, there's I can't tell what that is, maybe a 3. Doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. The finish work on these are exceptional. I don't see anything jumping out at me. I see a very high quality finish. Standard spring inside of there for retention of the hammer pin. There's no machining marks. There's no flash from the plating process that I can see. A lot of these engagement surfaces are extremely smooth. I can tell that they've been polished. What I'm seeing is a very high quality trigger here at a very reasonable price. Did I mention that this has a retail of about $60, which is a good amount cheaper than the Alg Act Trigger? Well, this is a great buy for the money. And they might have managed to get to this point by not doing anything with the disconnector and the pins. Might save a few bucks. That's a looking at the trigger pin here. What I'm noticing right off the top is that we don't have grooves all the way across on this trigger pin. We have one in the center and one on the outer edge. And the hammer pins are a little bit more tricky to take out. I probably can't push it out with my fingers right here. I'll have to take it over the workbench. The disconnector is a bit oily. I can't really comment much. This looks like a standard disconnector. There might be some polish work done to this. It's hard to say from just looking at it, especially with all the oil on it. We have the disconnector spring. Normally these springs are colored. This one's silver. I'm used to seeing green, but I don't believe the color of the spring just may indicate which manufacturer it's from. I don't know much about these springs. It's not like you can go out and get an upgraded disconnector spring, and don't recall any of these ever failing on me. So this surface is smooth and polished. I don't see anything inside of the channel here that's jumping out at me. Sometimes I've seen a few triggers that are plated with a lot of leftover junk on the inside of these channels. I don't see any of that with this BCM trigger. Let me go ahead and pop the pin out of the hammer, and we'll go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, I wanted to pop out the hammer pin because I wanted to take a look at these two pins. Normally, it depends on the trigger kit you buy, of course, but some trigger pin kits come with pins where there's a recessed channel on each of the outer edge as well as in the center. Now this pin locks into your hammer via a small wire retainer that kind of catches in the middle. So your hammer pin needs to have this notch in the middle. It doesn't really need to have the notch on the outer edge. Your trigger pin needs to have, it doesn't really need to have a notch in the center per se, but it does need to have the notches on the outer edges. The logic behind that is this pin sticks out on either end of your trigger, and the ends of your hammer spring will actually catch on those recesses. So that's part of the retention design of this pin. Now these particular ones only have one notch, so it's only going to be captured by one end of this hammer spring. I'm not sure why this design is the way it is. Frankly, there should be notches on both ends of the trigger pin. This is not a deal breaker per se, but it would be better if there were the two notches. And let's see, going back to the disconnector, I did clean it off a little bit. This appears to be a finely machined disconnector. It just has like a black type of phosphate finish on it. I don't see anything jumping out at me on that issue. So what do we have? We have an excellent high quality trigger kit with a nickel Teflon finish to the trigger and the hammer that is polished and finely tuned. I'm seeing trigger and hammer pins that are kind of standard. I'm also seeing a trigger pin that's missing a groove, which in my personal opinion, I believe it should have that second groove on it. I'm also seeing a disconnector that is not finished with a nickel Teflon, which I would prefer to see that. That might have been done for cost savings, so this particular kit would come in underneath the pricing of the Alg Act. I don't know. Let's go ahead and compare this BCM PNT trigger to the Alg Act, and let's talk about the differences between the two kits. Okay, moving on to our side-by-side comparison, we have the Bravo Company PNT on the left, and we have the Alg Defense ACT Act on the right. Now, as you can see right off the bat, there are extra components that come with the Alg Act. You have an extra hammer spring, and at the very top, way up here, this is a little slave pin. This slave pin is kind of handy for getting everything aligned and keeping everything aligned while you insert your trigger and hammer pins. You basically get everything installed, put the slave pin in, and then use your hammer or trigger pin, push it through the hole, and that pushes out the slave pin. So it's a little tool that you would use during the install, and then you'd probably never use it again. But it is nice that it comes with the kit. Alg Defense has also started shipping 2 hammer springs in their trigger kit. You have a standard mil-spec weight hammer spring, and you have one that has a lesser pull weight. According to Alg Defense, when using the purple spring, that's the lighter one, the one that's right here, your total trigger pull is reduced from around 6 pounds to around 5 pounds. Now, I don't have a pull weight measurement device, so I can't verify that. That's just what they've said. So I'm just passing on that information. I do think that having that option is very good. That's for sure. Other noticeable differences with the ALG Act, if we come down, we have, I guess we should start up here with the hammer. The hammer is a nickel Teflon finish, so it is very, very similar to the BCM fit and finish wise from what I can see. The actual manufacturer's marks on here are not the same. BCM has an S and a star on it, and ALG has 2 S's and a 6. The design, the finish, the fit and finish, the machine work are both top notch. I can't, aside from the markings, be hard to tell the difference between the two of them. Moving down into the disconnectors and the pins, here we have a big difference. The ALG Defense, the pins are, let's see, let me just verify this before I open up my fat pie hole. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. The pins have a nickel nickel Teflon, excuse me. I'm trying to weed through my notes here real quick. These pins have a nickel Teflon finish to them, and the disconnector also has a nickel Teflon finish. One other difference you'll notice is the grooves on these pins. Now these pins are in the ALG Act kit are identical, so you could flip-flop these from the hammer to the trigger, no issue. Like I previously mentioned, the hammer relies on the groove in the center. The trigger pin relies on the 2 grooves on the outer ends. So these are interchangeable. The BCM pins, while those are also interchangeable, they are missing the groove on one end of the pins. I don't particularly like that fact. Also, the disconnector with the BCM appears to have a standard anodizing or a phosphate type of finish. I'm not sure because BCM doesn't say. It is not, from what I can see, a nickel finish or a nickel Teflon finish. The ALG Act disconnector has a nickel Teflon finish to it. Now moving down to the triggers, there's also a difference down here. The ALG Act trigger, it has a nickel boron finish. The BCM trigger has a nickel Teflon finish. Now, I can't really comment on which one of these triggers would be the better one. Finish-wise, at least. Both are high-quality triggers. I don't really see any machining issues, any plating issues. It's just a difference in the plating finish. Let's see. I'm trying to see if my notes have anything about the nickel boron finish on the ALG trigger. I believe I read somewhere that it, I believe I read this somewhere that it was done so you could easily paint it if you wanted to paint your trigger a custom color. I could be wrong on that. My notes don't have that in here, but that was definitely something I thought was kind of odd. Now the materials that both of these are made out of, both kits are made out of roughly the same high quality materials. If you dig through all the specifications, you know, the mil spec AIS I8620 steel, the 1070 disconnector steel, that's the same. It's a high carbon steel, it's tempered, parts are heat treated, and let's see, the hammer and trigger pins. The hammer and trigger pins on the Alg Act are 4140 chromoly steel that's been quenched and tempered. The pins are centerless ground to a fine finish. They're 0.001 inch larger than stock to reduce play in the trigger assembly while retaining a slip fit into the weapon lower receiver. Both pins are nickel Teflon coated. The BCM are well, I don't have any specifications on the trigger and hammer pins. Except that they're honed, the trigger parts are 156, 157 holes. Actually, that's referring to the hammer and the trigger. I'm trying to read through my notes here. I thought there was something in my notes about the trigger pins, but well, okay, here's the section. The BCM hammer and trigger pins are impact resistant, centerless ground to a fine finish, and superior tolerances to ensure compatibility with all mil-spec lower receivers built per the US GI TDP. That's pretty much it for the trigger pins for the BCM. Sorry it took me so long. A ton of notes here I'm trying to read through. I don't want to read you off everything here. It sounds like I'm reading a book, and I don't read very well if I'm reading off of a script. So there we go. You know, we're looking with the retail of the BCM trigger kit at about $60, and the Alg Act, I think the retail is around $65, give or take a couple of dollars. There's not a large price difference, so you know, between maybe $5 and $8 difference between these two kits. I don't think you can go wrong with either kit, and I know most of my subscribers keep asking me to state my opinions on which one I prefer. I haven't shot a firearm with the BCM trigger. It's so new. This is the first one that I've gotten, so I can't comment on that. I build most of my rifles using the Alg Act Trigger. That's the trigger I include in my Too Fast Ultimate Lower Parts kit. I love the trigger. I love everything about it. I love the price point. I love the fit and the finish, the machine work, how smooth it is, the reset. I like the trigger pins. I like how the trigger pins fit. I love the disconnector. I love the fact that it now comes with two different hammer springs, so you can adjust your pull weight. You know, if you want to drop it from 6 pounds down to around 5 pounds, you have that option with the extra spring. And I also love the fact that it comes with a little slave pin, and that I use those slave pins every time I install one of these. You know, if you don't have a slave pin, you'll end up using one of your punches or something. And, you know, a punch is actually too heavy to use for that process. You know, if you move things around, the punch falls out because you've got a big handle on it. So the slave pin is a great tool to have. So my preference is the Alg Act. I'll spend the extra few dollars and get the Alg, but that's my personal preference. Basically, for the extra finish work, the better quality hammer and trigger pins, and the extra spring. Will I use a BCM? Yes, I'll use a BCM. I'm going to put this BCM in a rifle. Next time I'm at the range, I'm going to use it and put it through its paces, and I'll comment in my next range video. I don't expect to be disappointed with the BCM trigger at all. It is a very nice option if you need to save $5 to $8 in the price of your trigger kit. The BCM is going to be my next choice. If Alg Acts disappear, I'll go to the BCM in a heartbeat, no problem. So anyway, let's move on and take a look at each of these triggers installed in a lower receiver, and I'll show you the pull on them and the reset, and we'll conclude this review and comparison video. I have in this lower receiver installed the Alg Act Trigger, and I'm going to try and show you the trigger pull as well as the reset of the Alg. A very minimal take-up before the disconnector releases the hammer. And let's try that one more time. You see very little movement right there of the trigger. I've got the trigger, I'm holding it down so I can show you the reset. Okay, so there's the pull of the Alg Act and the reset of the Alg Act. Very smooth. All right, I have the same lower receiver here with the Bravo Company PNT trigger installed. So let's see if we can demonstrate the pull and the reset. Okay, and reset. The pull appears to be roughly the same as the Alg Act from what I can tell. The reset, now this is just my opinion from using one and then swapping in the other. It appears the reset's a little bit longer and the reset click is a little bit louder. That's about the only thing I can say on the trigger feel. I like it. You know, if you were doing a blind test with the Alg and the BCM, you may not be able to tell a difference. The fit was fine. This is the Bravo Company PNT installs very easy, just like the Alg Act. The one thing I will note is that these pins with the Bravo Company kit, they don't, one side of the pin is flush in your lower receiver, the other side stick out just a little bit, and that's a little bit different from the Alg kit. And the Alg kit, both pins are flush with the lower receiver. These stick out a little bit. It's just an observation, that's all. I'm going to go ahead and leave this BCM trigger in this lower receiver. Next time out at the range, I'm going to take this and we're going to shoot it, and I'll give you some follow-up feedback on this trigger when I actually have a chance to shoot it. So this is going to conclude the BCM PNT trigger tabletop review and comparison to the Alg Defense Act trigger.